Hi, I'm Deanne Fitzpatrick, and you're listening to Create Beauty Every Day. And this is my podcast for hookingrugs.com. And today I have with me Rachelle LeBlanc, another rug hooker who I met many, many years ago. And I love her work, and I've always admired her work. So I just wanted to talk to her about it. And welcome, Rachelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. How are things in Houston?
Hot. Um, Last night was very stormy, so the pool was overflowing. So we had to wake up and empty some of the pool water and stuff. So
Oh,
it's definitely a very different climate than Canada.
yes.
It
You
takes
lived in
some getting,
Edmonton for many years, didn't you?
yeah, for 10 years.
Yeah. Tell me about where you grew up and your life, your young life. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, I was born just outside of Boston in a city called Waltham, Massachusetts. And when we were three, my parents were originally from the Maritimes. So they decided after the three of us were born, three sisters, they decided that, they wanted to raise their kids in Canada. So we went and moved to a small town called Buktush, New Brunswick.
Mhm.
So I grew up, fishing and going to the beach, and I left for college at 18. And yeah, my father had a fish market.
Yes.
So most of the time, it was real drag. Every time we had to go work right before the school dance, we'd smell like fish, which really wasn't always ideal.
No.
And my mother at one point bought the local fabric store.
Okay.
So I got to play with fabric with her. So yeah.
What brought you to the mat? What brought you to the idea of rug hooking? And
Well, I was working as a designer in Montreal, and the fashion industry is a very intense, high stress environment. And I had two kids at the time, and I was really stressed out. So I just escaped for the weekend to Shelburne, Vermont, and fell across the Shelburne Museum. And it's a folk art museum, and every building has a different collection. So in the quilt gallery, in the back of that house, there was a rug gallery. And I had seen rug hooking before, but only in magazines and things like that. And I was always curious, and you could tell because the pages that I ripped out of the magazines and kept
yeah.
often had hooked rugs on them. So when I fell across that, I was really intrigued, and it started from there. I found a tiny little book in the library in Montreal and started hooking. I still hook with the same latch hook that my mother-in-law gave me. Yeah, and
So
it
do you
just
have the tip clipped off that latch hook?
no. I just put some tape because with arthritis starting, I needed a little wider. But
Yeah.
this little lever, when you put it through the linen,
Yeah.
my thumb automatically closes it
Okay.
as I put the strip of wool on it, and it pulls up easy. Like you really need that little lever because otherwise the hook is gonna get caught.
You don't
And
use a frame, do you?
no, I don't. I
Yeah.
don't need. If I was to use a frame, I wouldn't be able to use the latch hook because the hook part is a pretty big hook. So I
Yeah.
need it loose. It would be too taut.
Right.
And I can hook a thread, and I could hook, up to 3/4 of an inch. I don't have to change hook sizes and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that your process is a little different than most people who are hooking rugs.
Yeah, and I only found out really early on when I remember going to see you in your
Yep.
studio and stuff like that, and that was about around the time that I realized we had just gotten internet, and I just realized that there were more people doing this, and
Mhm.
they were using all these expensive tools, and we had no money at the time.
Mhm.
So, if you're gonna give something for free, I'll use it. Like, why do I need to spend all this money? So that's when I discovered that there was a whole community.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you learned on your own. You're self-taught.
Yes, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
self-taught. I never took a workshop.
Never.
Never. You know,
Never.
when I first met you,
Yeah.
I remember my knees were shaking because I had never shown my art to anybody. I painted at the time.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're working in the garment industry, it's a very critical industry too. So, you know, the art I kept very close to myself, and I protected it because I didn't want criticism and stuff like that. So when I went to see you that time, it meant a lot. And you said three things. You said, um, these are some of the most beautiful rugs I've seen in a long time, but I hate your faces. I understand.
Boring.
I understand why. And then
Yeah, I don't think I would have said I hate them, did I? I did.
I
Oh
don't
gosh.
like your faces. I don't like the faces, but because you don't like putting like the eyes and stuff. And at the time, I was just doing like little slits.
They
And
were really rigid. Yeah,
yeah,
at the time
yeah.
I remember. They're very beautiful now.
Now, but it, you know, organically it got to that point.
Yeah.
And then you said, I asked you if I should take workshops and stuff, and you thought about it for a moment, and you said, don't ever take a workshop. And I asked you why, and you said, because they're going to change the way you see things, and there's nothing wrong with the way you see things. And that was an amazing comment. And it's not that, you know, people shouldn't take workshops.
No, I agree. A lot of people should take them.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
but
they learn a lot from them.
but it really gave me permission to stand on my own and not need outside influence. Because at the time, I mean, this was 2004-ish, and the rules were very, very, you know, people were still talking about all these rules for rug hooking, and you can't hook with different strip widths and stuff like that, which is complete nonsense. And there were specific ways people wanted you to do things. And I think, you know, you identified that I might be a little more independent, and it really gave me permission to just stand on my own and not be afraid, because, you know, everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the third thing you told me was, don't be afraid to knock on the big doors, because it's easier to go down from a big door than go up from a small door.
Oh, did I tell you that? That's
Yeah.
good. Those are good advice. Those all good advice, really.
It was an amazing advice. Like I tell my students all the time, like it was amazing, because, you know, you don't always need someone to show you how to do things.
No.
You can be the first person to do it.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
you know,
true. I think that's what art is, and I think that's what makes your rugs art. Your rugs in particular.
Yeah.
You were just kind of, I could tell really early on that you were just in a process of discovery. Even the fact that you're using the latch hook sort of tells me that, you know, you're independent minded. And
right.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, when I meet rug hookers that want to express their own kind of ideas and patterns and stuff like that, you know, they often mention your name. They often mention my name and a few other rug hookers. I think our work really stands out. And there's room for all of it. There's room for everyone.
There's room for all of it. And there's room for people who want to just create patterns, and not, we shouldn't say just create patterns. Making is making. You know?
Yes.
The process of making is important.
Yes.
I try not. I remember once a friend of mine, her son was playing house league hockey, you know, as opposed to, and she said, I hate it when people say just house league. It's house league. It's great. You know what I mean? There's just you know, we should do what we want to do. Tell me about your book.
My book was really hard to do because I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
And it took me a while. It took a long time for people to convince me that I should sit down and write a book. You know, I wrote a workshop book that I have available to students. And that's just, you know, I realized, you know, at the beginning, my workshop can be intense for people. So instead of, you know, frantically taking notes all the time, it was a way for them just to sit down and relax and absorb, and then they could, you know, they'd have the workshop book for notes. But this book was different. You know, people wanted me to write a how-to book, and it it wasn't the type of book I wanted to read. And I'm self-taught, and I'm self-taught by going to museums and reading exhibition catalogs and reading about who the artists were in their time and how they saw life and how they treated the material or the paints differently and stuff. And that's how I learned how to become and to see and to look. So I wanted that type of book for people. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to only appeal to the rug hooker. I wanted, maybe somebody that's a textile artist that where they're intrigued about rug hooking. Well, this is kind of like that bridge into, the creativity of rug hooking.
Mm-hmm.
So the book, there's a little bit about my early beginnings, where I grew up, how all of it kind of influenced my subject matter. I left very young from home. My father died when I was 15. So I think, if you look at my work, I kind of surrounded myself with my family. If you look
Right.
at my early paintings, some of them became rugs. They were people I knew. So I wanted to kind of explain why and where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
also I also talk about my process. Um,
Okay.
and then there's a section with the catalog of works.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I think if I was to use a word to describe your imagery, I would say sisterly.
Yeah.
There's a warmth between the people in your images. Yeah.
Well, that's what happens. I mean, when you take a random picture or a random pattern that someone has drawn for you, even if it's a family member or something, like, you have that emotional connection to the family member. But when you're sitting down and you're drawing the lines and you're figuring out which lines you need and which lines you don't need, you're thinking about how you're going to hook it. What direction am I going to hook? What color do I need? Do I need shading and stuff like that? So it's all part of my process, where I start with the sketch. I do the watercolor painting for the color plan, and when I dye my wool, I use the color plan to dye my wool. I don't use recipes at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you sit down with the wool in front of you and you sit down, your hands remember all the figuring out parts. They're already familiar with these lines. So you can just relax and let, your subconscious kind of go to work. And as you grab strips and colors, they're intuitive. You have the examples of the watercolor plan. Maybe I always have Mary Cassatt. I don't know if you know her
Yeah.
work. I have her book is always open, just
Yeah.
because I love the sentimentality and how safe I feel when I look at her stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
all of this visual kind of influences your choices. And I think that gets translated.
Yeah. What's your relationship like with your sisters?
Um, it's hard because I left so young, and they're all still in the Maritimes. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's been good, and then it's been really bad, and
Yeah.
then now we're starting to build a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be away. I don't get home very often,
Mm-hmm.
and the relationships are built through the telephone mostly.
Yeah.
Now it's easier with Zoom and
Yeah.
Facebook and stuff like that. But yeah, it's hard. We don't know each other as well as I wish we did.
Yeah.
I would love to have family, next, in the same neighborhood,
Yes.
in the same state.
Yeah.
But I don't have that. Sometimes you kind of have to leave your family environment to find yourself, and I think
Yeah.
that's what I had to do.
I wonder, I'm not trying to, be a psychologist or anything, but I wonder if, and I know this with writing too, people have said that with writing, that when they're away from something, they have an understanding of it that they didn't have when they were there, or probably even wouldn't have if they were there. And I wonder if that happens in your work.
In my work,
Yeah, the relationships between the women, and the people.
Yeah, I think it's always easy, you know, sometimes as an observer, even if you're part of this family unit, you know, when there's dysfunction and stuff like that, or even if there's not dysfunction, if you're not always around these people, you know, you take a step back and maybe sometimes you see things that you wouldn't necessarily notice,
Mhm.
you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not always an easy thing.
No, I mean, relationships are not easy things.
Yeah, no,
You know,
no.
with anyone,
Yeah.
coworkers, family, children, we all, you know, no one is alone in struggling in that, right?
Yeah, it's very complicated. So, you know,
Yeah,
I like people in small doses.
yeah,
I don't like always being surrounded. So, you
yeah,
know, you know, my current career suits me just fine. The
yeah.
fashion industry, I really loved it.
Yes.
At the end, I was like a pattern maker and stuff. So I really love figuring out the three-dimensional, you know, stuff of patterns and stuff like that. But it was a bit too intense for my personality.
Hmm.
You know, I would burn out on occasion, and that's where when I found rug hooking, I would escape into rug hooking. So at one point, I had a burnout, and I was off work for about 6 months. And I
Hmm.
said, you know, if Van Gogh went, you know, crazy painting, you know, I'm a little nuts right now, so let's just, you know, dive into rug hooking and see what happens.
Okay.
And
So
it made me better.
the last time you came to visit me, you brought something different. You were hooking, but it
Yeah,
was completely unique.
yeah.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about that?
The
Sculptures.
the sculptures,
Yeah.
well, they are children. It takes about 32 pattern pieces to make the whole form. Um, at the first, I used my latch hook to make the loops, but the latch hook, like I said, the hook part is very big.
Hmm.
So the strip size is a number 6. So I punch needle it with Amy Oxford's punch needles.
Needle. Yeah.
And yeah, and I started a new one yesterday. So I just love them. It took about a year to make all 10 sculptures. Some of them have multiple figures. And every once in a while, my husband, you know, he would hear me giggle. And, you know, they're just so much fun to make. And I was curious to see, like, if I walked into a gallery with all these little people, like, what would it be like? So I just
Yeah.
became obsessed. Yeah, the first one you saw kind of looks like ET, so I
The
improved
one
as
in
I
my
went
house
around.
is great.
Yeah,
Can people see these on your website, Rochelle?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
they can.
And
Yeah,
that is what is your website?
www.rachelleleblanc.com.
And they can also buy your book there.
Yes, and yes, it's self-published,
Mhm.
so if you go on my website, there's links to lulu.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and it's called Finding Home: Rug Hooker's Journey.
And do you like to put a body of work together to create a show, or do you just like to make it piece by piece?
In order for me to kind of get in that zone where I kind of decide what I want to make, I have to say that I work in series. And,
Yeah.
you know, in order to start, the series that I'm working on now started with the invitation to take part of the exhibition at the Robert Bateman Center in Victoria, BC, called Castaways.
Okay.
I was forced to use only recycled stuff. So I was able to source recycled yarns made with recycled goods. So I kind of took that because it's a really large piece. So I've designed the next series around, you know, landscapes and water and maybe recycling and plastic garbage and all this stuff. So, you know, in order to kind of plan ahead, I did sit down and say, if I was to walk into a gallery,
Hmm.
what would I see? What would I want to see? And that's where I started gathering, you know, because I use a board and it's planned out as a whole year,
Yeah.
and there's one piece per month. And, you know, there's certain things that are stuck there, like colors or, you know, pictures that remind me of that trigger some kind of idea. So
Mhm.
they're all there. And I don't think about the final design on any of them
You just,
until
that's a
I get
great
to that
idea.
month. When I get to that month, that's when I figure out stuff.
Wow, you're very diligent
Yeah, I think it
and
comes from,
deliberate. That's very deliberate. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I tried, you know, especially with the success of, you know, the Finding Home series and stuff like that. I really want there to be layers in my work, that
Yeah.
it's not just a pretty thing to hang on the wall. You know,
Right.
there's some of my rugs that were really, you know, talking about pain. You know, when we moved to Alberta, it wasn't easy. My daughters had a hard time transitioning without their friends and stuff, and some of those painful moments are in, you know, the picnic and Revelation. So, you know, I'm trying to kind of find layers in my work.
Hmm. Yeah, there are definitely layers in your work. I
Yeah,
think that was very visible really early on. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't do anything else. Like, that's, you know, I hook and I can't stop, and like I'm completely obsessed with art.
That's good
Like,
enough.
yeah, like as soon as like that's one really great thing about being in Houston. There are incredible museums here.
Hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to like traveling to Dallas to go see the Fine Arts Museum there, and there's San
Yeah.
Antonio, and Austin apparently is really good. So this is like giving me itchy feet, this whole COVID thing, staying home.
Yeah, you want to get out and start
Yeah,
moving. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Well, I'm going to put this podcast up right away because I think it's relevant and lovely, and I really
Thank,
enjoyed talking to you, and I enjoyed seeing
yeah,
your work again.
thank
Is
you
the
very much.
mask on that little girl, is it hooked too?
Yes, yeah. You want to see?
Yeah, I'd like to see. Others can't see, they'll only hear, but you can look at it on your website.
Yeah. The whole COVID thing, you know, making and being productive and stuff really pissed me off at first, because,
Yeah.
you know, I was like, I don't want to be here just making stuff. And at one point, I had to make masks. So it
Oh,
says COVID-19, and it's
yeah.
miniature punch needle with
Oh,
embroidery.
okay, I got it.
Yeah. And it's
Ah,
a little blurry on, it's just messier on the hooked part. So
yeah.
I made this the right side.
Yeah, I know, the flat
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much. Tell everybody your website again so they know.
www.rachelleleblanc.com.
And the name of your book is?
Finding Home, A Rug Hooker's Journey.
Good luck in your work. Keep making.